Hey guys, today I would like to show you my knife collection and talk about how to choose a good chef knife. Before I start, I would like to tell you that this content is not sponsored by any company. No one is paying me for this video, so whatever I say here, it's just my opinion. All of these knives I bought with my own money, except a couple ones that I received as a gift from my father. I do not sell any knives, I just love collecting knives and sharpening. While I do think the Japanese make the best knives, I chose a more budget-friendly version, so you're not going to see any high-end Japanese knives here. I don't expect them to cut as well as high-end Japanese knives, but if you are going for a more budget-friendly version, here you will have some excellent knives in their price range. Today I will be giving some general tips, so maybe even if you are planning to buy a high-end Japanese knife, the video may have some good tips for you. The first thing you need to decide when buying a chef knife is the blade profile. Each person has a different cutting style, and different blade profiles will be adequate for different cutting styles. There are 3 different cutting styles, so slice, rocking, and push cut. If you like rocking, a more traditional Western knife with a curved profile will be more suited to you. So this curved style is very good for rocking, but if you love push cutting, that's not very good. If you like to have both the versatility of the push cut and being still able to do rocking, a more flat blade profile like a Gyuto, it's flatter but still has the capability of doing rocking. An 8-inch Gyuto is a very versatile option. It's not so big, so the tip is still easy to control. But if you prefer push cutting, the area available is not that large and you may have some problems dealing with larger food or large quantities of food. For this reason, many professionals prefer a longer Gyuto. If you love to push cut like I do, another option is the Chinese vegetable cleaver. It has a very large flat area and can deal very well with large vegetables and large quantities of food. As a trade-off, it's not ideal for rocking and the tip doesn't feel natural for beginners. Chinese chefs usually only use this knife, so the tip is more versatile than you might think at a first try. For me, that have not used a vegetable cleaver for so long, the tip from the Gyuto or the chef knife seems more natural. If I'm cooking with a cleaver and I need to carve something out, I keep a paring knife for this job. I think vegetable cleaver is very underrated. If your preferred cutting style is the push cut, I recommend you to try it out. Balance point is quite important for ergonomics. As I said, wrong balance point in a knife, it feels very awkward. Each person has a different preference, so some people actually prefer a handle-heavy knife for rocking knives. I don't, and most people also don't. Most people prefer either a knife balanced at the pinch grip or a more forward balance point. Notice what's your preference and choose accordingly. For handle ergonomics, I was a little worried when I bought the first Japanese wall handle because it's so angular, and I thought, well, maybe that's not really good to hold, but that's not the case. It feels very comfortable in the hands and fits very well. And it also allows you several different gripping styles, and it's very versatile. I do recommend it. This is not a full tang knife. Probably don't want one of these handles if you have an impact knife, but for a chef knife that you're not supposed to cut with impact, it does a pretty good job. And since it's light, it also favors a more forward balance point, and it feels really comfortable. Cheap handles like this, they just look cheap. It's quite comfortable too, so it's nothing wrong using. It also withstands water and has no maintenance issues. So aside from aesthetics and looking cheap, it's actually a good handle. Vegetable cleavers require a thicker handle because of the extra weight. It feels better that way. I do prefer the other handle, the Shibari, but this one is also comfortable. Nothing against Western style handles, they're also very comfortable. And it holds really well on the hand. The other problem you may have with handles is this fish belly format with the handle, because it forces you to do a hammer grip on your knife. This is the most comfortable way to hold this knife, but you would probably need a pinch grip. This one, it's not so pronounced, so it still feels comfortable, even though it's not ideal format. As with all wooden handles, it requires you not to leave it wet and not to use the washing machine. Anyways, you shouldn't put any of your chef knives in the washing machine, so that's not really an issue. But make sure if it's stabilized wood, you don't need to put oil on it. If the wood is not stabilized, you would need to put oil on it from time to time. I did not have a good experience with Rebrands. I thought they were fine. I mean, a parent company and you could trust it. I thought, hey, maybe this knife is good because it was also made by the same brand, but that's not always the case. So I heard, not sure if it's true, but I heard this is a rebrand, and they told me the spine was 2 millimeters. It's 2.8, and so yeah. And the factory edge wasn't so good either, so I don't trust Rebrands. Blade length is quite important, and it's very subjective. Some people prefer very small knives, about 6 inches, and other people prefer big knives up to 10 inches. The best option is to try out different knives and see which one you like best. But here I'll give you some tips on how this will affect the knife performance. Usually, home cooks have a harder time dealing with longer blades and may prefer small knives. A small knife will have better precision with delicate cuts with the tip, but it has some serious drawbacks to have a 6-inch knife. It will not have the same area for rocking or for a push cut, and will take longer to do the same job a larger blade would do faster. So professional cooks, they usually never use a 6-inch knife. When I started cooking, I had a tendency to prefer those small knives. Now I'm more inclined to pick an 8-inch or 9-inch knife. Still need to try a bigger one to see how it feels. But that's personal preference, and you need to learn by yourself what length of knife you prefer. Blade geometry plays a critical aspect when you are cutting. So even if the blade is well sharpened, it will not cut well if the blade geometry is wrong. So this is a 3 millimeter thick spine, and it has a convex grind, and as you can see, it only starts grinding 1.5 centimeters away from the edge. So you have a 3mm right here, and that's freaking huge. So this blade will not perform well on vegetables by any means, and it's also extremely hard to sharpen. This is 1070 steel. It's supposed to be easy to sharpen, but it's the hardest blade to sharpen in the entire collection. So it took me over 2 hours to sharpen it too, and it's still not a very good edge. It still looks great, so it's now a decorative blade. I like it on the shelf. For a good blade geometry, I prefer very fine knives. For a chef knife, it will have better cutting performance if it's thin. It has a nice profile distal taper, and when you look from the choil, it doesn't have any shoulders. Edge geometry has a critical impact while cutting. You see a very fine edge reflection here, and that helps to cut better. As you can see, the edge reflection here is much thicker, and that's quite noticeable when you try to cut. Edge geometry issues I consider to be one of the smaller problems a knife can have, because I can fix this on a stone. So with 1 hour work, I can turn this edge into something that looks like the other one. Bolster is a thing some people love and many people despise. I don't have strong feelings about it. It's a bit harder to sharpen near the base of the blade because of this bolster, so I do prefer if it has no bolster. But if you do, you need to grind it down when the blade starts to get thin, or you start to have a belly on your knife, and it will not make contact with the cutting board near the base. A knife without a bolster may also have its issues. So this has a very sharp cutting edge here, and it's very close to my fingers, so I almost cut myself using this knife a couple times. If I have to use a knife like this, what I do is I eat away this sharp edge on a stone. With tall blades like this, I do not have this issue, so it's far from my fingers and I'm unlikely to cut myself. Some knives already have this more rounded edge, so it has extra protection from both the height and the rounded corner. Now to the next topic. Best steel, it's not always the best knife. So it's easy to get confused with top quality steel and harder. And if you don't like the blade design ergonomics, you are unlikely to like the blade, and the other way around is also true. So this knife has a VG10 core and around 60 HRC, and I really don't like this knife. Why? Because it has such a rounded profile and I push cut. So at least to me, this knife is really bad. Maybe someone else that really loves rocking would like it, but it has no flat spot. So you can't use this blade for push cut. Also, the balance point is on the handle. So this is the most comfortable place to hold the knife, while usually what you want to do is a pinch grip, and this just feels weird on the hand. If it wasn't enough, this pronounced polished metal here, if the handle is wet, it slips. So I really don't like this blade. This one, on the other hand, is a Shibazi. It has 8CR13 MOV core. Factory hardness they specify as 56 plus or minus 1. I got a 55 HRC knife, and it's still one of my favorite knives in the collection. A vegetable cleaver is not for everyone, but for me that loves to push cut, it fits right in with my cutting style. Don't get me wrong here, I do wish it had a better steel quality. For the price range, I don't expect them to use premium steel, but for HCR13 MOV, it's not optimized at 55 HRC. The heat treatment would be a lot better if they had used a target of 60 HRC like Spyderco does on their HCR13 MOV. The edge durability would be a lot higher if they had done so. But nonetheless, the knife is still good. It's comfortable and it fits with my cutting style, and I enjoy using it. I did have to do a couple modifications to use it, so the choil is very angular and needed rounding, and factory edge is not amazing. I sharpened it at 10 degrees and put a 15-degree micro bevel on it, and with these modifications I really enjoy using the knife. Steel quality is a quite complex topic. As a general rule of thumb, you want a blade to be as hard as possible with as much toughness as possible. The high hardness will avoid the edge from rolling and will allow you to sharpen at more acute angles, while the higher toughness will avoid the edge from chipping or the blade from breaking. The harder you go, the more brittle the knife will get, so there's definitely a sweet spot there, and each steel will have a different target hardness, so it's important to not overdo on hardness. Many people will tell you that hard steel is hard to sharpen and will justify selling you soft steel because it's easy to sharpen. Well, that doesn't match my experience at all. So I have knives up to 60 HRC and they sharpen extremely easily. I've seen people sharpen 65, 64 HRC blades very easily, so that really doesn't justify using a 55 HRC knife. In my experience, what makes a knife hard to sharpen are two things. One is bad geometry. So if your knife is thick behind the edge, it will be a pain in the butt to sharpen. So yeah, a thin knife, it will be easy to sharpen, even if it's hard steel. The second thing that makes a knife hard to sharpen is grain growth. The metal on steel is organized in crystals. If these crystals are large, they may detach as a whole and the edge will not get thin, or at least it will be very hard to get thin because there's a grain of sand in your edge. Not really, but you get the idea. Right now I can put shaving sharp all of these knives you're looking at, but it took me a while to get there. In the beginning, there were several knives that I could not achieve the same level of sharpness, probably because of grain growth. Traditional European knives from Zwilling, Wusthof, Victorinox, the hardness they used goes from 56 to 58 HRC. While I don't have knives made from these companies, I have knives with similar hardness, and I do not have any issues with edge durability. As a home cook, it does attend my needs. On the other hand, a higher hardness would give better edge durability without any drawbacks, as long as the steel has good toughness. High-end Japanese knives are very hard. They go from 63 HRC up to 67. And from 63 HRC, you already have hardness enough to sharpen your blade with 10 degrees sharpening. This more acute edge will have better cutting capacity. So for home cooks, that's very interesting. While these hard blades will have better edge retention than a 56 HRC knife, that's very clear. But it's hard to compare different hardness on this high spectrum. So a 50H HRC, for example, it may be too brittle and you lose edge from microchipping, and a softer blade, let's say 64 HRC, and it has a higher toughness, it may have a better edge because it doesn't chip as easily. What prevents chipping is toughness. So if a high-end Japanese knife is chipping, a higher hardness blade no longer becomes an obvious choice. So they are very hard to compare just from looking at the specs. Knife steel is a very complex topic, so I'll just keep it short here. Maybe I'll talk about it in another video. And that's it for the video. I will be reviewing some of these knives, so if you want to watch more videos, subscribe, activate bell icon, and see ya.